YouTube? It's Nerdy, and welcome back to the Transmissions Draft League, Season number 4. Today, I'm bringing you our final matchup of the season. We got an interesting one versus an undefeated Season 4 sweepers so far. We're hoping to be the only team to beat them. Now, this game doesn't have any implications for playoffs, as everyone's seeding is completely locked in as of this battle, but it is still fun to see if we can be the only team to beat this team in the regular season. So let's meet the team we're going to try to do that with. First off, we got Choice Scarf, Final Gambit, Squawkabilly. It's pretty good in the matchup because it's solid into a lot of his Pokemon that can actually be taken out by that Final Gambit. The main one being Klefki. On top of that, Brave Bird is good into Sinistcha. And Parting Shot is obviously really good, especially into Pokemon that we don't normally have a way of slowing them down, namely Pokemon like Archiludon and a special attacking Basculegion. Other than that, we are also running Fake Tears because there is a potential lead of Squawkabilly next to a Pokemon later down that can threaten to one-hit KO basically every Pokemon on our opponent's team. And also Squawkabilly has excellent pivoting ability to be able to switch into our Psychic Terrain Sitter to allow us to fire off those big Expanding Force attacks that can really rip through our opponent's team because they only really have a couple of resists, and even those Pokemon don't really want to see Iron Crown, especially the one that we're bringing. We're also bringing Physically Defensive Indeedee. This is partially just because we want to be able to stop things such as Iron Hands or even a physical attacking Basculegion F if he decides to bring it. Basculegion F does learn Last Respect, so that Pokemon can be a problem. Of course, we are normal type, so being able to redirect those ghost type attacks into us does basically mean that we can wall out that Pokemon. But those water type attacks are still going to hurt, especially if it's in rain. But, you know, do with what we can. We also have the Psychic Seed so that we can live special hits a little bit better, even if our Psychic Terrain gets overwritten by Misty Terrain Klefki. And speaking of that, we are also running Skill Swap, and the main target for this is going to be Klefki, so that we can get rid of its Prankster, kind of neuter its ability to actually take away our Psychic Terrain again, and set our Psychic Terrain back up. We are also running Psychic as our main damaging option, as our opponent doesn't really have any dark types to really worry about other than Greninja, which obviously I'm not too worried about. We're bringing Hariyama. Close Combat and Knockoff hits pretty much everything on our opponent's team that it needs to, and then Wide Guard is obviously really good, so our opponent does have a surprising amount of spread attacks. We're also running Ogerpon because it's really fast and really strong, and Rock is actually a really decent type in the matchup. We're also bringing Grafaiai, Switcheroo, Sunny Day, Encore, are all really good disruptive moves. And then Iron Crown, we are the special attack boosting set, and just fast enough to outspeed the fastest Archiludon possible. So yeah, that is the team we're bringing. Hopefully we can get a win versus an undefeated team, and I will see you in the match. Alright, we've made it to the match. It looks like our opponent brought basically everything that we were expecting, and also included Braviary. Maybe respecting the Squawkabilly, of course, in the team building video that I did put out. Hopefully before this, you did see that we were kind of disrespecting that Pokemon, and honestly, I feel like we were completely fine in doing so. We have interesting sets across the board. We have a Mental Herb Klefki to get rid of things like Encore and Taunt. So a little bit of something there for Grafaiai. They are Steel Beam, Rain Dance, Reflect, and Light Screen. So obviously trying to slow the game down a little bit there. We also have Iron Hands with a Booster Energy. I assume that's going to be Attack Booster with Fake Out, Close Combat, Rock Slide, and Sword Stance. So that's interesting. Also Terra Psychic. So looking to take those psychic moves a little bit better. We also have Assault Vest Archiludon with Snarl important to remember there, as Archaludon is one of the main threats that we are worried about. It is also Terra Fairy, so has actually a pretty good matchup against our Hariyama, but is still a little bit Iron Crown weak, as once it Terras, it is weak to our Tachyon Cutter, and if it doesn't Terra, it is weak to our Terra Blast. Also a Fairy type Sinistra with Machikacha Shadow Ball, Nasty Plot actually, with Rage Powder, so we got to be careful of that. Psychic Seed Braviary with Defiant. Acrobatics is their main flying stab of choice. I'm hoping that we get them that special defense boost. And then they are Close Combat Feather Dance Tailwind set. And then we have a Specs Basket Legion. All right. So we have a ton of options here. Our opponent is obviously pretty teched out to beat Iron Crown and also Hariyama, which isn't the end of the world, as I do think both of those Pokemon are capable of just kind of muscling through our opponent's team in a lot of ways. I was messing around with the idea of a couple of different leads from our Grafaiai and our Iron Crown, and I do think that I like that lead still. The other thing that this can really do is, because we have Switcheroo on our Grafaiai, we can take away some really important items from our opponent, namely the Assault Vest on Archaludon, as that Pokemon actually starts to take a ton of damage from our Iron Crown once it loses that, even regardless of Snarl. So that is obviously really nice to have. The other thing is we do have Wide Guard Hariyama, which does prevent our opponent from being able to use Snarl, which is obviously really, really nice. That being said, I do think that I want to try that lead. I think that my opponent is honestly not in a great position to handle that. So let's go ahead and lead Grafaiai Iron Crown. The other thing that this can do is it puts a ton of pressure on the Klefki to make the correct choice on that first turn. Because if it doesn't, we can easily Super Fang and then knock that Pokemon out, set up a Sunny Day when they're trying to set up the rain, and really deal with it that way. I do like Indeedee in the back. Like I said, they do still have quite a bit of tech for it, but it is not the end of the world. Hariyama also really solid still in the matchup, as given that this is a more offensive Iron Hands, our Hariyama actually does threaten to Oko that Pokemon now, as we built for the kind of bulkier Iron Hands. And then because it is Terra Psychic, we also have that dark coverage if it chooses to spend the Terra. So we are going to take Hariyama here. Now, there is an argument to not even bring in Diddy here, as I don't think we actually need the Expanding Force coverage in order to really blow through our opponent's team here. Obviously, it is really nice, as it allows us to get around things like Rage Powder. But again, still not the end of the world there. I think I am probably going to bring in Didi. The only other argument is a Pokemon like Ogerpon that can really threaten the Braviary if they're going super hard into that strategy. There is also an argument for Squawkabilly, as I do think it's actually pretty solid in this matchup. Let's go ahead and bring the Indeedee though, and we'll see what 616 wants to do here. This is, in my opinion, one of the matchups that is pretty 50-50, and it really is just going to come down to who plays better. We have a lot of really good matchups, and we have a couple of matchups that are tenuous at best. So let's see what our opponent wants to do in lead here. We do see the Klefki in lead, and it's actually the Braviary in lead. Okay, Braviary, it looks like, is actually probably going to struggle to deal too much damage to us. Braviary. And now let's bring up Iron Crown with the special attack booster. Okay. I think what I like about this is that with no Psychic Terrain up, Tachyon Cutter actually does roughly 80% to this Braviary. So we can do really decent damage to it. And the close combat is it's a roll to 2-hit KO, but very not in their favor. And if they drop their special defense, we can actually just Oko that Pokemon. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to switcheroo the Iron Ball onto the Klefki. This makes sure that Klefki doesn't have the Mental Herb anymore, and it also is now slower than our Grafaiai, allowing us to Encore it into whatever it decides to go for here. And then I'm going to go ahead and fire off a Tachyon Cutter into this Braviary. We are in a pretty aggressive position in my opinion. Our opponent really can't deal a bunch of damage to our threats on board. Should put us in a really solid position here. Okay, Reflect does go up as we switcheroo the Iron Ball into the Klefki. Tachyon Cutter comes out and does a solid amount as Braviary goes for Tailwind. Okay, now that we have removed Klefki's Mental Herb, I'm going to go ahead and Encore that Pokemon, as it is now probably going to be pretty ineffective in the matchup. And honestly, let's go ahead and actually just click Tachyon Cutter again. Braviary doesn't want to take it, and the best Pokemon that can take this is probably the Archaludon in the back, which obviously is going to fear the Terra fighting Terra Blast coming for it as well. Basculegion actually going to be the switch in as Encore fails. Close combat going to connect. It only does 41%, so we will be able to take out the Braviary in that situation. So I imagine that our opponent's final Pokemon has got to be the Archaludon, a Pokemon that definitely doesn't like the fact that we have the ability to cut its HP in half, kind of regardless of what happens on this turn. It also doesn't like the fact that we can set up the Sun, which it desperately needs the rain up if it wants to be able to use Electro Shot to try and start snowballing through this game. It is actually the Iron Hands is the final Pokemon on our opponent's team. So this is really interesting because I think it's pretty obvious that my opponent wants to go for the Fake Out and the attack into the Iron Crown, but I also think that 616 is aggressive enough to make reads here. And I know that 616 also knows that I like to play super aggressively. Now, a pretty obvious play on my end could be switch into Indeed Terra Expanding Force. Um, Honestly, I don't think that I need to be aggressive in this position. I would rather try to stall out my opponent's Tailwind. So let's go ahead and go for Super Fang here, and I'm going to actually go for the Protect. If it's Fake Out and attack into the Grafaiite, more power to them. I think that that's completely fine. However, if they fail to take out the Grafaiite here, we can easily lock the Iron Hands into Fake Out, making it a kind of non-factor. Okay, Terra Psychic actually going to come out here as Shadow Ball goes into the Protect. Super Fang going to cut Iron Hands' HP in half as it goes for the Sword Stance. So this Iron Hands is actually slower than our Iron Crown because it is also slower than our Grafaiite. So now we can go ahead and use Encore to lock it into the Sword Stance. And then Basket Legion is locked into Shadow Ball here. Let's see if a Specs Shadow Ball from Basket Legion F, and this is Swift Swim, so the Shadow Ball into Terra Fighting. And we actually do have quite a bit of bulk here, so let's see how much bulk we are running. Our 8412. So we do have a roll to actually we guarantee live this, so we can actually just go ahead and go for the Terra Fighting. Unfortunately, we actually don't have a way of taking out this Basket Legion F, so it's probably not even worth it. I think it's better, honestly, to switch into Indeedee, I think. Yeah, let's go ahead and switch into Indeedee, actually. Oh, just kidding. I blocked my own Encore as Close Combat's going to take out the Grafaiite now. And now we can go ahead and bring in our Iron Crown and use Expanding Force here and follow me as well to make sure. Actually, this is choice specs, so now without the tail end, it can't outspeed us, so let's actually just go ahead and go for the helping hand. We do have to make sure that we take out the Iron Hands. Psychic. Expanding Force does not get the KO, so we actually have to go for Tachyon Cutter here, and we have to go for the follow. Lefty actually going to come in here, as the Tachyon Cutter does take out the Iron Hands. And then if we look at Basket Legion F, Helping Hand Expanding Force would get the job done, but regular Expanding Force comes pretty close, and we do have Hariyama in the back, so we can go ahead and just click regular Expanding Force as we click Follow Me here. Rain Dance does come up as Muddy Water actually going to manage to take out the Hariyama, or the Iron Crown here. So instead, we have Hariyama against two Pokemon here. We can actually go for the Wide Guard so that this Basket Legion can't deal any damage. And let's actually just go ahead and click Psychic here into the Basket Legion. Neither of these Pokemon can protect anymore. And Basket Legion, as we said, is locked into the Muddy Water. A better move on that previous turn would have been to protect and Psychic into the Klefki, or even into the Basket Legion, just to kind of get an idea of what that Basket Legion locked into. Wide Guard comes out here, is going to block the Muddy Water attack, as Psychic comes out, does a little under half to the Basculegion. Klefki going to not be able to outdamage this, and it will actually take itself out, as it looks like 616 did not actually go for a odd HP stat. It looks like this final psych is going to be a roll to KO. So let's see what he's going to go for here. Muddy Water still getting blocked. Psychic doesn't get the KO. Steel Beam also fails to knock out as Klefki falls. And now we have a guaranteed win here. Alright, we are now up a game, which is obviously really nice to have. And I think that our opponent was obviously very prepared for our Iron Crown shenanigans. We made a couple of silly plays, but it ended up not mattering in the end. So let's go ahead and continue with our strategy, I think. I do think that Grafai was sufficiently disruptive enough, and I think it still matches up really good even to the Pokemon that our opponent didn't bring. So I see no reason to really change up our strategy. I'm going to stick to what we were doing, and let's see if 616 can adapt. And I do think that we are in the driver's seat. Obviously, being one game up does help, but let's see how 616 can adjust, as I think we can play a little bit better, and I think it is on 616 to adjust. So the adjustment is actually the Basculegion comes in here. Here we can go ahead and really easily, we can go ahead and go for the Super Fang here. What this does is it puts Klefki into range of what our Tachyon Cutter is capable of doing. And on top of that, in order to outspeed our Iron Crown, he needs to be able to set up the rain here, so we can easily protect and see what move he wants to lock into here with both Pokemon. If it is the rain, we do guaranteed underspeed thanks to the Iron Ball, so we can make sure that the sun is up before either of these two Pokemon move, and it will allow us to make better decisions here. Rain Dance is going to come up as Shadow Ball goes into the Protect. Super Fang drops Klefki to 50%, and now we can go ahead and click Sunny Day, and I like the Terra Fighting here. Let's see actually if Klefki Tachyon Cutter, it looks like, is the only move that is capable of getting this KO, aside from maybe a Terra Fighting Terra Blast. Obviously want to be going for the Tachyon Cutter here. We can also go for the Expanding Force here. Yeah, we definitely want to be clicking Sunny Day here. And then I believe if Klefki does click Light Screen here, it should actually live the Tachyon Cutter, which is fine. Obviously, we would rather be KOing that Pokemon, but it is not the end of the world here. The other thing is that we can once again switch in the Indeedee here. I would rather try to preserve our special attack boost, so let's go for the Tachyon Cutter here. Light Screen does come out as Sunny Day comes out. Klefki actually going to drop to this, so it's not as bulky as we anticipated, and unfortunately Shadow Ball going to KO because after all of that messing around, we ended up forgetting to click the Terra button. So a little bit on the back foot here. Let's go ahead and bring in our Hariyama, as Sinistcha actually going to be the Pokemon to switch in here. Basculegion in kind of a rough spot here, I would say. So now we can go ahead and actually, I think what I would rather do is I'm going to go ahead and click Switcheroo here into the Basculegion, and this forces it to be even slower and also gets rid of their choice specs. And then we can pretty easily go ahead and go for Terra Dark and go for the knockoff into the Sinistcha. We're not Guts boosted just yet, so this shouldn't KO the Sinistcha unless it is pretty frail. But I do want to deal as much damage to this Pokemon as I can. Okay, Pterodark comes out as Switcheroo, going to take away the choice specs. Knockoff nearly takes out the Sinistcha, who goes for a nasty plot. And then we do resist that Shadow Ball thanks to the Pterodark. Okay. Now we can go ahead and encore the Sinistcha actually, because it did go for the nasty plot, and we can go for a knockoff into the Basket Legion, which definitely should knock out. Basket Legion still can't really do anything that takes us out because we are in the sun, as I said. Ice Beam, definitely their strongest move as we are in sun. Now Archiludon comes in. This Pokemon does not get Protect, so we can go ahead and go for Encore here, and we can go ahead and go for Close Combat. I believe actually our opponent did not use their Terra, so I think actually the better move to do here is to probably switch to the Indeedee and go for the knockoff into Basket Legion. We know that we outspeed both of these Pokemon, and the easier KO is into the Basket Legion, so let's go ahead and make that play. We do actually want Archiludon to use the Terra here if it is going to attack into the Hariyama. But I think it's a pretty safe read to say that Archiludon is going to Terra and attack into the Hariyama here. Let's see, it is Terra on Archiludon, who goes for Flash Cannon. Just barely doesn't take out, as Knockoff takes out the Basket Legion, and we will go down to our own burn here. So now we can bring back in our Grafaiai as we go for the Psychic and the Super Fang. Hopefully the combination of those two moves here should be able to get the knockout onto this Pokemon. As it no longer resists our Psychic, they only have one turn left of the light screen, and we are in Psychic terrain. Okay, Electroshot actually going to come out here, as our opponent seems to want to take their sweet time and actually trying to take us out here. So let's go ahead and go for the Psychic and the Super Fang once again. Electroshot comes out, not even going to deal 50%, as Psychic does a ton of damage there, and we do see that our Indeedee is outspeeding this Archiludon, so we should be able to take the victory there. Unless this Archiludon can get a crit to KO. Yep, there it is. And your Manchester BEWEARS finished the season with a neat little sweep there. We managed to do it. We are 5-2 at the end of the season after quite a rocky start. And your BEWEARS are, in my opinion, the most dangerous team in the playoffs right now. So be sure to keep an eye out for that, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.